Good evening, everyone. I'm Maria Carpenter, the Assistant Director of Alumni Relations at Bridgewater College, and I want to welcome you all to tonight's virtual event, Catching Up with Coach Clark. We look forward to the day that we can once again gather safely on campus, but in the meantime, the Alumni Office will be hosting a variety of virtual alumni events, as well as a video series to help keep us connected, even when we can't be closer than 6 feet apart. This session will be recorded and posted on our new YouTube channel, Bridgewater College Alumni Relations, as well as our alumni Facebook page. At the end of tonight's event, there will be a Q&A session, so please ask all questions via the chat feature at that time. First, we would like to welcome head football coach Mike Clark to tell us a little bit about what our Eagles are experiencing this year and how their season has changed up from what we originally planned, but we're optimistic for a spring season.
All right, well, I'll put my face mask on. That is my normal attire here, but the fact that I'm in my office by myself, technically I don't need to wear a mask. Certainly it's been a different time, something I couldn't have drawn up, we wouldn't have been able to imagine. It's been a tough time in terms of having to adjust plans. I really do think with our players, and I appreciate the resiliency of our kids, the kids on our team, the resiliency of our coaches on the staff that are working with me. I think we might be on plan 5 now. And as we've had to step up, it's like, here is the new plan. Are you ready to buy in? And when this thing started back in March, we came up with adapt. Okay, you better adapt, adjust, and buy in. Those were the 3 words that we said, as this thing moves, so much is out of our control. Those have to be key ingredients to the team. And that has been for the kids. And I'm really grateful for the energy that they still show up. We still have, we've been able to hold most of the team together in a very difficult situation. We stayed busy. That was probably the focus throughout the spring and in the summer, to try to hold the team together, to hold the group that you had together, particularly, when it was announced in July that we were not going to be playing, that the season was going to be shut down, as kids anticipated, and what everybody knows a football season to be like. When that wasn't going to be a factor, boy, we really had to do some good work in constantly re-recruiting the team that we have, which is usually a part of Division III anyway. And over the last 6 months, it's been part of Division III on steroids. We've just really been having to pull that very quickly. Our coaches have worked very hard recruiting next year's class, as difficult as that has been. Doing it virtually, doing it individually, masked on campus here. We're not bringing big groups onto campus right now because certainly with a lot of the high schools, at least in the Mid-Atlantic area where we recruit, moving their competitive seasons to the spring too, it's put a tremendous adjustment on our recruiting calendar that we've had to adapt to, and because ultimately you win with players. The key ingredient is, I see it, we had a lot of momentum based on the energy and what we did last year. I was able to coach an undefeated championship football team, at least in the regular season. That was momentum we certainly don't want to give up. I'm still undefeated this year, and I'm going to be undefeated through December. So in that sense, the key thing that I've tried to tell our coaches and I've tried to tell the team, this thing will settle. Eventually it will. It'll get back to what we all remember is normal operation. But when that time comes, I think the programs that have held it together, certainly we can't be at ground zero at that point. It can't be, all right, now we got to start and build this thing back up. We have to hold the key components together. It's a big challenge. Like in a lot of jobs, and I'm sure Stephon and Bob can relate to this, in coaching, we have to do tough jobs 7 months a year in the off season, and to enjoy really the 5 that are about the season. In Division III football, you don't get as much football time as you do at other levels, which is where you see the fruit of your work. And certainly our off season now is in month 9, and there's 4 more months to it that we have to face. So we haven't gotten that charge or that jolt that I think athletes need to say, this is why I do this, to get that rush. One of the highlights when I think
Saturday evening after a win in the fall is one of the best experiences. The rush that I get and the relaxation and the endorphins, even if it's on a long bus ride home, we're not going to get that. I know that. It's been a long time. But in the end, we have to always say it's tough when you have to apply what you preach. And certainly as a coach, I have to adapt, I have to adjust, and I have to buy into a lot of things that people tell me this is what we're doing. And, I'm not the one, making decisions or getting much input on it, but that's how we have to adjust.
Absolutely. And we appreciate all the adjustments you have made. We know that, you're right. We came back from a terrific season last year, and the next one will be just as great, just a little different and slightly delayed, like most things in 2020, moving into 2021. But we definitely appreciate your hard work and the whole coaching staff along with that. And speaking about coaching, I know that right now it's a complicated time. It's not really what we were used to for, trading in Friday night lights for Wednesday night Zoom, as we've said. But, we want to also focus on just the positive side and not in the current state as well. So in terms of your coaching experience, you've coached at Bridgewater for many years now. I'd love for you to share with us it doesn't have to be a favorite memory, but maybe one of your favorite memories of you as a coach, of what just made you, get that gratification of, I love what I do. This is why I do what I do. Because I feel like in these times, as things keep changing, we can't predict the future. It's important to remember why we do what we do and hold on to that even as things change on a daily basis.
Well, I can use that to segue into the people that I'm going to introduce that I asked to join me on this call. When you guys reached out, I guess about 2 or 3 weeks ago, Maria, I said, yeah, I'd like to help you with this, but there's other people that I would like to get involved. I've been fortunate. I've won enough games that I've allowed myself, and they've had to keep me around. I think in this business, at any level, I used to teach a coaching class, and I would always my opening statement was, all right, tell me what you can trust. You're going to go into coaching in athletics. What can you trust? And then I get all kind of answers from my students, and they would talk instinct, your faith, all the different variables. And I told them this. I said, if you're going into coaching, I'll tell you what you can trust. I said, you can trust winning. You can trust winning. If you do that, you'll be surprised what you can survive. And if you don't, you're not going to negotiate your way out. But I do think, that being said, I'm grateful for all the wins. The rush at the bell, the adrenaline rush that I get when I know that game is won, it keeps me going. Someday when I walk away from this, it'll be tough to replace. But probably more importantly, I've been around some great people. I've had great coaches around me, that I've had great players. I'm at the point now where former players are my friends, and you don't know what a thrill that is, to be able to sit down with somebody who you were able to recruit, who you were able to coach, who is now a grown, successful adult that I consider a friend. And the bottom line is, in athletics, we have selective memories. I got 101 losses out there that I can throw some dirt on those real quick and not discuss them, even though, I had to learn from a lot of those. But I also think, the scoreboards fade, and they eventually, however many I won, somebody's going to win more. And there's always, you're chasing a moving target. If that's what you're going to say, this is going to always motivate me in sports. But, from my perspective, to be able to share that with good people who hopefully have allowed me to influence them a little bit. And I'm very grateful for the influence they've had on me. That's why when you asked me this, I said, there's other people I want to share, because, the imprint here, there's a lot of pronoun battles that go on in this day and age. And, and in athletics, particularly in a team situation, these aren't my wins. These are our wins. They're their wins. And if you really want to be politically correct, I should do that on my email, and say, put that in. This is what we are. I am the coach of this team. It's not me, my team. There's been a broad group of people that have contributed.
Absolutely. Well, that's a great segue, like you said, to introduce our first guest, and I'll let you introduce him, Mr. Stephon Healey.
You know, I tell the story about Stephon Healey. I got a call from a guy with an English accent that was driving back from, I don't know what he was doing down at Averett, in Danville. I remember meeting him, and back in that day, I met him and just talked to him at Nininger Hall. I called Bill Miracle, who was Dean of Students at the time, and he picked up the phone. I said, I got somebody I need you to talk to. Back then, assistant coaches were could be resident directors too. Most of the resident are what they call area coordinators now. We're also assistant football coaches or assistant coaches in multiple sports. And I said, you need to talk with this guy. I think he's good. Remember that summer, I'm walking down a golf course, and Bob Colbert and I were delayers. We got our cell phones, I think, later than anybody on any staff. And it might have been, I think I had a school cell phone at the time, 4 months a year, and it was right before and I remember walking down a golf course and a phone ringing, and I pick it up, and it's Stephon Healey. I was talking to him and he was in London, and I remember turning to the guy I was playing with. I go, isn't this amazing? I'm walking down the fairway and I'm talking to a guy from London. And I do think I appreciate when Stephon came. I always appreciated his perspective. He had an international perspective, even though I remember his first summer year, I had to disappoint him because it was the weekend of the World Track and Field Championships. And he said, what channel is that on? I couldn't find it on the TV previews. And I told him, I said, track and field's on every 4 years in America when the Olympics come on. I go, it's probably not on unless you find the delayed broadcast somewhere. But I always appreciated he had an international perspective, and was one of the guys that I think the kids rallied around and respected. So Stephon, with that, that's my introduction.
Well, still miss Bridgewater, so made a lot of good friends, worked with a lot of good people, and always thank Coach Clark. I remember my first game there was against McDaniel, and we won the game, and we didn't play great. It was 2003, and I remember I was kind of poopy faced after the game, and and I remember you teaching me the lesson that day after the game. I was I was a little upset, and you were and you taught me the lesson to enjoy the win. We'll coach it up tomorrow. Enjoy the win, and and that's one of the things, one of the lessons I thank Coach Clark for, and always anytime you get a win, they're hard to come by, and when they do come, you really got to take some time to enjoy it. So it's been over 10 years since I've been there now, so I definitely miss the place. It was a great experience.
Absolutely. And thank you for sharing that, Stephon. And if I understand right, you didn't run away from football. You're still very active currently as a football coach. Can you tell us a little bit about that and how your experience at BC brought you to where you are now?
Yeah, I worked with, right now I'm currently working at Gallaudet University. It's the only university in the world for deaf and hard of hearing. And funny enough, Coach Bob Colbert was the head coach there back in 1971, if I'm right.
His picture's still in the that one museum thing. I remember seeing when I was up there.
Yeah, it's still remembered.
The drum.
The dirty 30. So I'm not sure what kind of football you were coaching back then, Coach, but yeah. So I'm there now. I'm a defensive coordinator, assistant head coach, and I run the strength and conditioning for all the teams. And Bridgewater was a great kind of launching point for me. I think I was at Averett working with the current head coach Chuck Goldstein, who's at Gallaudet right now. But really, I think being at Bridgewater for those 8 years, it kind of legitimized what I was doing as a coach, and helped the resume and helped me move on. And I ended up moving on for kind of personal reasons. It wasn't professional reasons, but still in the game, still coaching, still trying to in the business of developing young people, and that's really, for me, that's what it's about, and I think chasing the win and doing the right things to get that win is what I'm passionate about, always have been. And I think that's what Bridgewater football is about.
And I think this,
Absolutely.
I'd say this, Maria, people don't understand the sacrifices Stephon made to be an American football coach. You know, coming from London, though, where he had football background over there, did some stuff at IUP, did, you know, at Stephon, you know, in college, you know, the exposure that he had. And, you know, gosh, you know, I had an adult male, you know, living probably, he's too old, he living in a dorm to do that, you know, managing freshmen and right in Heritage Hall. And I always remember that you had a guy that really sacrificed. I understood. I know a lot about hiring international employees that I had to learn, you know, when we brought Stephon in at that time. It's not a simple procedure. It's not a cheap procedure. And, you know, you have people that he's invested. I will tell you that.
Yeah, I promise you, you've not lived until you wake up at 5 a.m. to start like a workout, then you game plan all day, don't finish till like, you know, 9:30 at night, and you go back to the dorm and you've got to do rounds and then set up like dorm programming, you know? So like, you haven't lived until you do that.
You're hanging the holiday decorations in the hall and everything else while still.
You name it. You name it.
Well, and especially for someone who is coming not just from another city in Virginia or even another state, but internationally. I mean, that's a long distance, you know, from Bridgewater, Virginia. What made you want to be a part of BC? You know, what made you want to be a part of the football experience at Bridgewater?
At the time, like, you know, Bridgewater was a winning program. I know, like 2001, coming off the national championship game. I was over here and I interviewed at Hargrave Military Academy, and you know, and I was still friends with a guy I coached with at Averett, and there was, you know, heard about an opportunity, and literally I like drove from Danville, you know, up to meet Coach Clark, you know, and you know, it was part of just being something that was established and was great, and I knew it would be good. You know, in a selfish part, it was going to be good for my resume, but like, you know, you don't anticipate, you know, what you're going to get and what you're going to receive once you get there. So like, you know, working with people like Coach Colbert, I'm forever thankful to Coach Colbert and for Coach Clark, and, you know, learning that. I remember Coach Colbert, I remember like my first year, and you'll be proud of me now. I actually have, like, Coach Colbert used to, you know, when he game planned, he'll sit in the office and he'll sit in like silence, and he would have like, you know, he would use one of those like kind of grid pads, and he'd like slowly, like, he'll pause the video and then he'll draw his idea, like, you know, meticulously, and put it down and then pick up the remote again. And we'd be sitting there for hours, you know, and it was just, you know, just learning how to prepare. Like, there are lessons that, like, you know, that just priceless. Like, you know, just there's things like, you know, I learned, you know, like from being there, and like, you know, and just being able to switch. It's like, you know, being a coach, developing a personal relationship, but then, you know, having that professional side. So like, you know, when I think of like someone like Coach Colbert, there is like, you know, I always remember like my first couple of weeks, like, you know, we hadn't started yet. So I was kind of just settling in, you know, and then Coach Mickey and Joey, Coach Soltis, like, you know, they were saying, don't worry, Coach Colbert's going to change once the season starts. Right? And I was like, he's the nicest guy. He's the nicest guy. And it's like, when it was football time, that's when the game face was on for the season. And then, like, you know, afterwards, you know, once the season was over, hey, it was back to like Coach Colbert. It's like, but it was like a great lesson to learn. Like, you know, it's like, this is the professional side of it. And I just learned so much from both him and from Coach Clark. You know, it's phenomenal.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I think it's so important for, you know, current players who might see this, or anyone who's considering being a part prospectively of the Bridgewater football program, to hear that it is a legacy program. You know, it is something that you carry on with you and you learn life lessons, and it's not just showing up to play the ball game, but a lot more of the Bridgewater values that they try to instill, you know, in their students. So that's really great to hear how that's continued to stay with you, you know, and stick with you, and the fact that you want to come back and share about it. Coach Clark, did you have anything else that you wanted to ask with Stephon or share before we invite Bob to join us?
No, I'll go on, because I think there's guys out there that I'm hoping when I ask Stephon, I'm not a guy that calls a lot of people. I'm not a guy, I'm past the stay on the phone stage in my career, but I do think that, Stephon's a guy I've kept in touch with, I followed, and again, it's not only turned into somebody that you work with, it's turned into a good friendship. And, there are people out there that if you got in a pinch, you said I could call him and I know he'd return my call and get some help. And certainly Stephon and Bob are two of those guys for me.
That's great. Thank you. Well, thank you so much, Stephon, and we'll come back to you at the end. But right now we're going to switch gears and invite Coach Colbert to join us. And Coach Clark, would you mind giving us another wonderful introduction for our other special guests?
Well, I thought, I came to Bridgewater because I didn't have a job. I was living in Lexington. The long story, they said, would you come down and talk to us about this job? I lived in Lexington, Virginia. I was at VM. I didn't know where Bridgewater was. I'd never heard of it. And, sometimes there's a great song by the Rolling Stones. It says, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, you just might find you get what you need. And that's, for me, that's how it worked out. I do remember, Bob, I knew, I competed against Bob when I was at Virginia Tech. He was the offensive coordinator at JMU. When I was the defensive coordinator at Tech, I knew of him. Our children were classmates over at Turner Ashby. So I knew him and Chris. And, Bob had moved around a little bit. He stayed back here. I always respected that. When Rip Shear went to Memphis because his daughter was a senior, he didn't move. Actually was out of coaching a year. He was up at UMass for a couple, commuted. That was a long commute. And I can still remember, talking to Bob Colbert out there in 42, the bagel place. Do you remember that, Bob? The one morning we were out there at the Mr. J's Bagels. And I took him out to breakfast at Mr. J's to talk to him about, coming over to Bridgewater, to coach my offensive line, become my offensive coordinator. And I was embarrassed to the amount of money that I offered him at the time, but he probably took the job because he needed a job too. And then it ended up, I can still remember, when he left to go to St. Vincent to be a head coach back in winter of 2006, after the great run we had a bunch of young guys around us. And, we were on a run there that, lasted six years, turned in 99. I was, 2005. And I remember Bob looking at all these young guys and saying, I want you to know, I'm, leaving up here to go to become a head coach. I take this opportunity at St. Vincent, but, these last 6 years were the best I've ever had it, and it was because I think Bob was like me, he appreciated winning. There was a period there in my career where in 7 years I was involved in 11 winning football games. And so I have a keen appreciation for winning. Always appreciated his candor. And probably one of the smartest decisions I made in coaching is after our initial year where we were 0-10, and a good 0-10, a very competitive 0-10, but we would have been 0-15. We just were going to find a way to screw it up, compete but screw it up. I remember coming back that year. I knew my job was on the line. That would have been in 99. Phil Stone was the president. In my end of the year meeting, said, Mike, you're my guy. We got one more year to get this fixed. And, at the time I thought, well, if I'm going to play for my job, I'm going to go back. And the funnest thing I've ever done in football was the couple of years I called offensive plays, my early years here at Bridgewater. I still think that's probably the most fun thing you can do in any level of football. It's called the offensive plays. And I remember one time thinking, and I might even run it by Bob, I think I might take that back this year because I've got this on the line. And I decided, I better not do that. And really, Bob was one of the more gifted play callers. As a head coach, you love to come in and watch the film on Sunday morning and say, gosh, there are 5 or 6 of those. Those are just great calls, called at the right time. Some guys got it and some don't. I'm blessed now. The guy that, called my plays for me this year, Scott Lem, first year he ever did it. And I kind of felt a lot about Scott like I did about Bob. It's like, we never wasted a trick play. It just was called at the right time. And, in the end, Bob, like Stephon said, during the season, Bob could be the heavy and I could be the nice guy. And sometimes when you're the head coach, that's not a bad thing to be. So he was a guy that made me a better head coach. That's my introduction.
Yeah, that's a great introduction.
Okay.
I need to hire you to write one for me and just play it back in the morning. That's great. I'm glad you have so many great things to say about the football staff and all the years that you've been there and how they've played such a important role for BC's football success. And Bob, would you mind just telling us a little bit about your time at BC and how long you were a coach and just some of your memories from that?
Well, I came to Bridgewater just like Mike said. I was out of work. The coach at UMass had retired, and Mike and I joked a lot of times. We both wound up at Bridgewater because nobody else wanted us. And Mike was kind enough to offer me a job. I think that was the season of 1998 as the offensive coordinator. I made a great impression. We were 0-10. That was a heck of a year for us. But as Coach said, as Mike said, anytime I talk about my career, I've had two really great experiences. The first one was at Gallaudet, where Stephon coaches now, because I only coached there for 2 years. And this team that he talked about, the Dirty 30, we ended up the season with 17 players. We actually had to cancel the last game of the season because it was too dangerous to play. But it was very satisfying. When I came to St. Vincent in 2007, I had 18 players from my 1971 team from Gallaudet show up to watch Gallaudet play St. Vincent. So you can see how gratifying that was. And Mike, I know, will appreciate that fact that those people thought enough of me to come up and watch us play Gallaudet. So that was a very satisfying experience. And the other one is Bridgewater. And I say that without any kind of stretch of an imagination, because we took a program that was down in the dumps. And Mike, I don't know how many Whedon seasons they had, Mike, and was it 5, 6, 7 like that in all those years. And we went from 1998 to 0-10 to 2001 playing for the national championship. Lost it by 3 points to a very good Mount Union team. And then went on to go to the playoffs the next 5 years. So I say that without a doubt that Gallaudet and Bridgewater College were the most satisfying years I've had in coaching. And I guess I kind of forgot how many years I've been coaching now, but that's a true statement. And we had fun at Bridgewater. Mike's great. We had great players. I could have called an off tackle right and it would have went for 70 yards. Great call. It was easy. Give the ball to Devon Cruz. So that was an easy call. So I appreciate Mike saying that. But honest to God, I say sometimes like I was the first base coach of the offense. In other words, you see first base coaches, nice hit, one out, watch the fly ball. Take a great runner, Devon Cruz, Marcus Washington, run right, and they're gonna break a long play. I don't know, Mike, if you recall, we were playing Johns Hopkins, and we were having a tough time stopping them on defense. He said, "Bob, run the clock a little bit." I called an isolation play and went 80 yards for a touchdown, Devon Cruz. And Mike said, "Bob, I told you to run the clock." I said, "What do you want me to do? Tell them to fall down?" So it was great players. We had great players, and it was a great time for me in terms of a satisfying point in my career. And I left because I had been in coaching a long time, and I had a chance to become a head coach, and I wanted to try and see if I had the skills to be a head coach. So that's why I came to St. Vincent. But I have no regrets at all. I'm like Mike. I have some former players now that'll call me once in a while and they'll razz me about something, and they've become friends, and they're not afraid to. I got a million stories about some of those guys. So yes, it was a great experience for me.
And the big thing is, and I think I stay. Again, I don't call a lot of people. I stay in touch with Bob, but when we had our team of distinction, here last September for the Gettysburg game, I asked Bob and Ralph Robinson, who was my defense coordinator on that team, the Stag Bowl team, to kind of be the host, knowing that I get
I didn't have much time for that on that game day. And I remember the kids rallying. And probably the neat thing is that, no question, when you get kids that are 18 to 20 years old, 18 to 22, you deal with issues. And certainly the issues haven't changed since I was in college. I mean, they're handled a little differently now. But I do think there are many kids where deep down they might have been great football players for us, and they headed out of here, and I said, this could be 50-50. It could go either way, once they get out on their own. But I remember I was just the short time that I had on that day, and certainly Bob and Ralph saw that, when the kids came back, most of those, I'd say all of those kids, if you finish here, you come back, they came back and they were accomplished. I mean, they had friends, they had family, they had children, and even the ones that kind of had that edge and were on that bubble. I mean, you could sit around and shake their hand and find out what they were doing and say, boy, I'm proud of this guy. We obviously had an impact on his life, and to get to see that, that's one of the benefits we had. I've had in coaching is it haven't made a ton of money, but I haven't been a moving target either. People know where I've been at. And it's fun to share. It's like Bob said, it's fun to share those relationships.
We got into coaching way too soon, Mike, with the money that they're paying coaches now and what you and I earned when we started.
No question. I was a defensive coordinator for 5 years at Virginia Tech, and if you're a coordinator at that level now and get fired like I did, you're unless you're really stupid and selfish, you probably don't have to work, with the money they're going to give you. But you're right. We missed that window, but we became thousandaires with a lot of good memories.
That's for sure.
Absolutely. And speaking of the calls he made, Coach Clark, you said that Coach Colbert made some great calls, when it was, when it's everything's on the line and you have to make the right one or make what you think is best. Coach Colbert, I'd love to ask you if you have one that sticks out, or two, or, whichever. Do you have a call that sticks out in your mind as like the best call when you're like, I know I made the right decision and we got the win and it was just a great moment of feeling that? Or on the other side, maybe one that, I don't want to say worst call, but one that it was stuck in the back of your memory of, man, I wish I would have went with the other route, or I wish I had, making a different call.
I would venture to say that my favorite call, and Mike, you can agree, disagree, was the first time we ran our little sky pass against McDaniel. And if you remember that pass, and It was something that was a little bit unusual in football. And when it's run today, everybody calls, there's a Tebow pass, there's a Tebow pass. But it was a little jump pass we had. And that's one of my favorite plays because it was just a little bit unusual and the kids had fun with it. They had a lot of fun with that little play.
We were doing that, Maria, for 3 years before Urban Meyer did it at Florida with Tim Tebow, and he got all the credit. But, that's the nature of the beast sometimes. I'll tell you a call. I remember Bob Colbert, we were playing a double overtime game down at WNL the year we went to the Stag Bowl, and WNL had some great players that year. They had two little running backs. They were just fast, white kids from Texas, and they could play, and it was a heck of a game. And we come back in the fourth quarter to tie it, to get it to overtime. It's a double overtime game, and we blocked their field goal. We blocked the field goal. They had the first possession the second time, and Bob was the first time, and in the press was 6-14 wide dump. We had Jason Lutz, who was a great quarterback. It was an option pass, and Devon Cruz, who we knew they'd be keying on. We dumped it to Van Williams, and Bob called the play, 6-14 wide dump. Our team broke the huddle. We saw the defense lined up, and the guys in the press box said he shut his book, and he said, I'll see you downstairs, and walked out of the press box because he knew it was going to go for a 25-yard touchdown, and it did. So I do remember that one, too. That was one of the calls that stuck with me, that he made an impression on those young guys in the press box. He didn't stay around and watch it.
The reason I left, Mike, I saw it was going to work, but I was cold. You remember that day it was cold?
Could have been.
I'm cold, guys. This game's over.
Bob was in some bad press boxes. Now, I remember down in Maryville, pouring down rain, and they made us sit outside. You go to Division III, visiting press boxes and visiting locker rooms would be, I couldn't say publicly, and the words to describe them are, and they talk about sportsmanship. There's great sportsmanship in Division III. No, there's not a lot. Look where they make you dress, go to the bathroom, and sit in the press box during a game. No, they don't. That's poor sportsmanship, and that's in a lot of places in Division III.
Well, I hope to have the confidence one day that Bob has with walking out of the press box and knowing that call was going to work. I think that's great. And I wanted to ask you, Coach Clark, I'm sure that you've worked with many coaches over your time as head coach, as you still continue as head coach today. What do you think is the most memorable time shared with Bob specifically as a coach with you, or what you think was his greatest attribute to the team as a coach?
I would say this, as I mentioned, a lot of times when I do a lot of my hiring, I try to hire anti-Mike Clark. So, the young guys that I have around me now, they're all my children's age and younger. But gosh, they're high tech. The technology, how they understand. Our playbook's 4-dimensional. It's voiced over, it's 3-dimensional. They're embedding stuff. The things that they do, but they understand this is how 18 to 22-year-olds learn and communicate. And, I certainly, I'm probably not the detail guy that Bob was, but, he allowed me to. I was a good technical coach of a quarterback, and I didn't have to say a word about the game plan. I remember I'd do the special teams, and I'd work with the defense, and I'd sit down with him, and he'd tell me, this is what we're doing, sitting in the chair in his desk, this is what we're going to do. I always appreciated that. The other thing I appreciated, I mentioned about Saturday nights, Bob Colbert, after a win, he would throw a great post-game party. He had a fire pit, and I remember going and just sitting and relaxing around the fire pit, particularly the year when the Colbert clan would come down from Pittsburgh. If you wanted to see 70-year-old women have Jägermeister shots, you could do it at the Colbert house. Okay, when Aunt Marie came down, that was in the end, those were just, and I think people that aren't in coaching, or certainly most people, they don't understand particularly in season, the hours we put in. We get off Thursday night and Saturday night. Those are the 2 nights where we get off. And whether, those Saturday nights after a win, knowing even though you got to get up, go to church on Sunday morning and go into the office, those were always special nights. I always appreciate those. I was never cold, and, I was always relaxed.
Hey, Mike, you recall when I was the head coach at St. Vincent and you were the head coach at Bridgewater, playing up here at St. Vincent, and the pregame talk between the 2 coaches on the field is, okay, you bring the beer, I'll bring the pretzels, and you bring your family out, my family will be there, and let's have a good time.
I would say that, one time the Colberts when we played down here, I remember they had the tent up. You had the tailgate tent up, and Aunt Marie and the crew came down, and then after we played you, I didn't take the bus back. I'd stay and go to the party at your house. And we were fortunate to win those games. And I remember one time down here, Aunt Marie, and she always took care of the toast at the end of the event. And as we kind of circled up, she goes, what do we toast to, Coach? And I said, we can toast to friendship. It wasn't about, we're not toasting to a team. We're just toasting to friendship. And, certainly that transcends the scoreboard.
Those were great nights. They were a lot of fun, and you always got the best meal. I was 0 for 4 against you, so I didn't like that, but it was always good. I always enjoyed competing against a friend. I always enjoyed that because you knew that the game was going to be fair, and nobody was going to try to take advantage of you in terms of scores or doing something illegal. It was always good to compete against Mike because we were friends, and that made it that made it fun.
That's wonderful. And you both respected each other and your programs and your coaching style. So you knew that you both knew what was most important at the end of the day, although you both, of course, were trying for the win. But it was still a win of friendship either way. Thank you so much, Coach Colbert. I'd like to welcome Stephon back on so we can start our question and answer portion. So that way we'll all be on here able to answer questions. I'm going to go ahead and ask the questions, and then if it's not directed to someone specifically, each of you could answer if you like, or just whoever wants to. And then obviously if there's one specifically, that person to answer that.
Maria, can I take 1 second to just tell Stephon, I hope that you're enjoying that experience at Gallaudet. As I said, that was my first coaching job, and it's a most unusual coaching job you've probably ever had. And I hope that you're enjoying it. And someday that when those kids, the kids I coach, they're all my age. They're my age now. So I hope that you'll feel that same satisfaction that you're doing some good there. And it's not always about the wins and losses, particularly with those kids who have a little bit of a disability. And I hope that you're enjoying that experience as much as I did. It was a great 2 years for me.
Yeah, it's been a unique challenge without a doubt, and I enjoy it. It's still, at the end of the day, for like those video gamers out there, it's like coaching is like playing Madden with your life. It's like you're creating players and you're going out there and you're playing games, and every day you're competing, whether you're recruiting, whether you're in the weight room, whatever you're doing, and that doesn't change being at Gallaudet. It does have its own unique challenges, but it's a great place, and it's got a great tradition there, so, I do enjoy it, I think it's been great. I just add one more thing, Maria, talking to Coach Colbert. I have to say I'm a little disappointed, Coach Colbert, about one thing. Coach Clark, you didn't pick up on Coach Clark. He called them trick plays. Back in the day, you used to always say they're not tricks, they're special plays. And you would correct everyone every single time. So I was a little disappointed you didn't correct Coach Clark right there.
That's where they were specials. There was actually a newspaper article on specials one time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. There was. But yeah, it was just something I didn't like to say trick for whatever reason. I don't know why I said it, but that just.
That always stuck with me.
That's great. I'd love to start the question and answer portion. So to everyone watching, feel free to submit a question in the chat. We're going to get through as many as we can. The first one is for Stephon. What was BC football like when you started? And how has it changed since you have been at BC? I think this one was submitted when you were talking, Stephon, but if anyone else would like to answer it that it pertains to, you're more than welcome.
Okay, so can you repeat that again? Sorry.
Yeah, absolutely. What was BC football like when you started, and how has it changed since you have been at BC? So obviously you're not at Bridgewater anymore, but in your time span at BC, how did you kind of see the program evolve under Coach Clark's leadership and Coach Colbert?
I mean, for me, it's like, I walked into a winning program, and, we always talked about doing the things that winners do. And that, I think that aspect never looked like, from the inside and then now from the outside, that aspect's never changed. I think there's always been the hunger there. Like some of the faces might change, but that aspect stays the same. But I think with programs, I think you ebb and flow with who you can recruit a lot of the time, and then as recruiting goes and as schools change things like admissions policies, I think those things change. And I think that becomes a reflection of what you can get in. It changes your whole dynamic. Once you go to a school, where I am, it's a certain profile that you have to recruit that fits the model of the school. And I think as that changes, I think I think your fortunes ebb and flow with that.
Absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. It's definitely a learning curve as things continue to evolve, and as programs change over time, and there's so many external factors that affect that. So that makes a lot of sense. Thank you for answering. We have a question for Coach Colbert. someone asked, what is your impression of the BC facilities today in regards to football? So obviously we've made a lot of improvements over the years with our facilities. So just kind of asking, compared to when you were coaching, how have you seen it possibly improved, or what is your impression of it?
When I was the head coach at St. Vincent, I would, when the president came down to watch a game, I said, look at these facilities. Look what they've done here. This is Division III. This is what you can do. I don't know. I was down visiting my daughter last week or so, and I took a ride up campus, up the street from campus, Mike, and we practiced on that field in the neighborhood up, was it College Street or something like that? Y'all remember that?
Top deck field.
Yeah.
Field.
It was just a vacant lot, and we practiced there. We didn't have any turf. I guess it was because it had rained so much. It was so bad. So their facilities, I would bet you, are comparable to some of the best Division III facilities that are existing at this present time. But I always told anybody, take a look what they've done. This is how you do Division III football.
Thank you, Bob. We're having a lot of questions come in, so that's great. I'm glad that everyone's enjoying the program and enjoying everything you all have to share. Let's see. I'm just scrolling through here. One of them is actually not a question, but a thank you to all of you. So I'm going to read it on behalf of Matt Barnhart, who submitted it. Okay. So this is not my words. This is Matt. He just said, I simply want to say thanks to Coach Clark and the Bridgewater football family for making fans like myself feel like part of the team. Although we didn't put in the hard work during practices and in the film room, and we never scored a touchdown or made a defensive stop, you all made us feel like part of the team with your appreciation of our game day cheers and pro-BC message board banter during the early 2000s. My personal experience with Bridgewater football is one of the main reasons I am the professional and person I am today. So on behalf of the fans, thank you, Coach Clark, Colbert, and Healey for the memories.
I'll tell you a Matt Barnhart story. Dr. Glenn Barnhart, his dad was a heart surgeon that was on the trustees at one time, and Matt was our film guy. Now he's a big cheese at the USTA. You want tickets to the US Open, Tennis Open? Call Matt Barnhart. Get the word out. But what he got into, we went up and he was our film guy. We had our first playoff game up at W&J, Washington and Jefferson. It was so windy and cold. This is outside of Pittsburgh. It was right before Thanksgiving, and that their guy did not go up into the big film lift that they had in the end zone. They weren't going to shoot an end zone copy. Matt Barnhart, that might have been his first year filming, we sent him. They said, oh, we're going to go shoot the end zone copy. So he went up in the tower. You crank this thing up, a machine, ran it up to the top so he could film the game. Then the guy from W&J at halftime, their guy wasn't up there. He didn't go back to let him down. And I still remember they would shoot the scoreboard. You showed it running down at the half, 20 minutes, and Matt Barnhart was still up there. He was still up there, had to spend the entire half, and it was a good thing we kicked the hell out of him in that game, because he was a good teammate that wasn't a football player, but a great teammate. Hey, BridgewaterFootball.com. That was back when we were cutting edge back then.
Can we have coaches Colbert and Healey talk about their experiences at Gallaudet and how their coaching style evolved compared to BC?
Stephon, go ahead.
Well, mine's like kind of reversed to Coach Colbert. So it's I'll talk about the transition from moving from Bridgewater to Gallaudet. The hard thing is it's communication. Communication takes 2 or 3 times longer. So if you're coaching a lineman, there's no shouting at a kid. You physically have to run around, jump and get in front of him, and then communicate with them. So if somebody's in a stance where normally you might say, no, get in a 3 technique. You have to run onto the field and hope the play isn't snapped and move the kid or like, you know, get in front of him, you know, and everything is you stop. You can't speak while you're like, you know, you can't speak while like someone's setting up or like, you know, or during a play. And then the other thing, there's no whistle. So you find yourself at the end of a play is like you're physically running in and jumping and waving your hands, you know, to you know, get everyone's attention. I mean, it's a completely different dynamic, you know. So like, you know, you go from that and then, you know, and then on top of that, like practice. I mean, I think my first or second year at Bridgewater, we had like, it was something crazy. It was like 177 players, or it was something outrageous we had. Like, and you know, it's, you know, we ended up having to like practice twice during the one a days. We'd practice twice, and like, you know, it'd be a morning practice and then an afternoon practice for gold and for cardinal groups. And where I am is we'll have 65 players. So we have to service each other. So it's not like, you know, we can't have an inside period and a team period where, you know, it's like offense is serviced by the scouts. No, it's like our ones on defense are servicing our ones on offense and vice versa. You know, so like it's just a completely different dynamic. Everything takes longer, you know.
My experience at Gallaudet was, as I mentioned earlier, was very memorable. I went there as a 23-year-old kid. I really wasn't a very good coach, to be honest with you. I interviewed for the assistant coach's job because I had one more year to go in college, and I was looking for a little bit of an income. So I went down and interviewed as assistant coach. And about a week or so later, the athletic director said, "Bob, our head coach just resigned. Well, you want to be the head coach?" I said, "Sure, why not?" I was 23-year-old. I did not know sign language. I didn't know the first thing about sign language. So I took a sign language course, and I was actually taking a full load at the University of Maryland and being the head coach at Gallaudet. And again, I wasn't a very good coach. Technically, I really wasn't. I thought I had some good leadership skills, but I could tell you numerous stories. And Stephon, you can probably relate to this. When you started signing, you signed the wrong sign down there. You could get in a lot of trouble.
Oh, yeah, and they will tell you the wrong sign.
Yeah, they did that numerous times to me. And as I said, it was a great experience. I met my wife there. I'm married now 47 years. She was dating one of my football players. All I can say. And so it was I can't tell you how many of those former players I still keep in touch with. And that's since 1970, still in touch with them. And so it was a very unique experience. Like Stephon said, it's the only college in the world for the deaf and hard of hearing. And it's a challenge, but it's, at the end of the day, it's a lot of fun.
And I don't know if you ever experienced this, Coach, but here's the one thing I'll tell you. Like, another experience that you won't get anywhere else is losing a game because, you know, your defensive end can't hear the whistle, and like a wide receiver jumps offside, your defensive end sees the ball snapped, runs through, kills the quarterback, even though it plays dead. Like everybody's been blown dead, and you lose a game because you got a personal foul. I mean, it's things like that you just can't stop. You know, it's unbelievable. You know, but it's just part of the course. You got to live with some of those things.
Stephon, you and I could probably talk about Gallaudet all night, but we'll get back to BC football.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing about your experience there, though. It's great to hear some of the differences and also similarities between the coaching styles for both programs. Moving on to the next question. Oh, so this sounds like an interesting story. For Coach Colbert and Coach Clark, can you talk about your feeling of jumping into the pool post-game after beating Emory and Henry for the first time in 20 years, and your feelings about coming back to beat John Hopkins after the long rain delay? This sounds like an interesting one.
You know, Johns Hopkins was actually a game that, changed us. I mean, I really thought that was the 99 season. We had just, they just scored, kicked a field goal. It was 24-10, a Friday night game, and lightning struck. Really, so And, we had about a 2 hour and 20-minute delay. And I'll never forget, we went in there and one of my, how technical this is, my college roommate, Jimmy Daly, was down there with his son. They were our ball boys at the time. It's pouring down rain, lightning. And I turned to Jimmy and young Jimmy. I said, get our footballs. Find our 6 footballs. And they went and found our 6 footballs. Again, advantage of Division III, we were dressing in the women's locker room. Okay, had all those blow dryers all around. We took those footballs, and one of the things we did, a 2 hour and 20-minute thing, we dried them to a T. I mean, those things were brand new and light and rubbed down. And even though they offered us unconditional surrender, they were going to send us home and declare the victory. I said, well, stay here all night. And unfortunately, I had Phil Stone, who was the president at the time, was in. He said, well, you have an administrator here in the stands. I said, yeah, our president's at the game. And I said, but there's no sense asking him because he's going to tell you, he's going to say the same thing I say. I said, no, we're not calling this game. I'll stay here all night to finish it. And I'll never forget, after about 2 hours and 20 minutes after we had told our kids they'd offered unconditional surrender, our kids didn't take that lightly. We were on exercise machine, rowing machines. We had actually kind of broke into kind of this one little gym facility down there. So our kids were jacked up. I'll never forget, the official came in, he said, how long do you need to warm up? I said, 5 minutes, because I knew they wanted to get out of there. It was midnight, and Hopkins had been sitting in there. Well, I don't know what they were doing for 2 hours, 20 minutes. We went out on the field, and I'll never forget, I saw 6 Johns Hopkins game balls still under the same wet towels they were under 2 hours and 20 minutes ago. We went out and threw the ball over and scored like 24 points or 28 points in that fourth quarter and smoked them. And so if somebody says, what was the key ingredient to Bridgewater, it's success, it's dry footballs. Okay, dry footballs when the other team doesn't have it. Emory, it was a good thing jumping in the pool. I think if I didn't get jumped in, if I didn't jump in, I was probably going to get thrown in. And just so you guys know, I did jump in that pool one other time. I forget when it was. I might have been whatever year, and that's after we were told not to jump in. They took the diving boards out, so the second time I couldn't jump off the high board like I did the first time. And then the second time, I'll never forget. When I travel, I always travel with money. You always have to have cash on hand just in case. And I'll never forget, this girl came up to me, and after saw our players jumped in the pool. It was Drew Kirkner's senior year, so I don't know what year that was. And I'll never forget that this girl was angry, and she said, you weren't supposed to do this. I got to clean this place. And I'll never forget, I pulled a $100 bill out. It was a Ben Franklin. And I said, this belongs to you if you keep this between us. she took the $100 bill, and then I never did hear from Coach Kendall on that. So it was a great investment, one of the great investments I made in my time here in Bridgewater.
I never jumped in the pool, Mike.
Yeah, you had bad knees back then. That's before
right.
They were replaced. We might have had to pull you out.
There was no lifeguard on duty, I'm assuming, at that time. So
No, there wasn't. There was a bunch of guys swimming in equipment too that we were watching for sinkers. That's for sure.
All righty. Well, looking here, I think we just have about one more question that we can fit in before our ending time. Let's see. This is a question for Coach Colbert. Do you have specifically a favorite season that comes to mind? And if just briefly, all of you want to chime in and share yours, that's totally fine. But if not, that was being asked to Coach Colbert.
Oh, I would say 2001 when we played for the national championship. That was for me a professional high. We were on the national stage that night, if you recall. That was because it was the 9/11 had taken place in September, and some games were moved around, and we got to play on a national television. I think it was a Friday or Saturday night. I can't recall.
It was a Friday night, and we were the only game on TV that night. Can you believe that? ESPN with only one game on TV, So I do remember that.
I would say that was the most memorable game I had, because we really had a chance to win the national championship. I mean, again, to go from 0-10 in 1998 to within 3 points of a national championship 4 years later, it says a lot about the kids we had and their character and their physical ability. And when I talk about characters, there were some characters on that 2001 team, Mike, and I'd say that was my most memorable game at Bridgewater.
I think I, to be honest with you, Maria, I always try to avoid that. I asked many times, who was the toughest? What was the most memorable? Gosh, I mean, I've been blessed. There's a litany of them. If you guys that weren't raised in the Catholic Church, a litany means a long, long list, you know, the litany of prayers. And
Oh, I know,
so,
Mike.
yeah, so, okay, yeah, that's right. You were raised. I see you at Mass. I see you at Mass. But what I got into is, I think there's just so many of them. But like I mentioned earlier, it's just, you know, some of the people stories here that just, you know, those are the ones that, gosh, I really, you know, carry with me. I don't know whether Chris Baggett's on the call. I saw he was registered, but I'll still remember, you know, him playing. I think he got one pass in his careers against Catholic. Jeff Heifel was the quarterback, and you know, Chris is one of the great teammates we had, and you know, we're in there and we're beating like Catholic like 50 something to nothing, and then, you know, Bob, we're down about the 14-yard line. He said, I need to throw a pass here. I want to throw it to Baggett in the end zone. So we throw a comeback route in the end zone, and Jeff Heifel hums it in there, and he catches it at the pylon for a touchdown, you know, to make the score like 59 to nothing. And that really endeared me to their coach. You know, I had to run over and shake his hand. But I do remember, you know, I can still remember, you know, walking off the radio show and seeing Chris Baggett with his family over there in that corner of the end zone talking about the play. And I made a point to go find that ball and give it to him. And I think he still has it. I hope he does. And so, you know, it's kind of those memories. You know, those are the ones that and someday I need to write all these things down, because, you know, the bottom line is there's always going to be somebody that wins one more than you, and there's always somebody that's going to lose one less. And I told somebody, I read one time, and I do believe this. Don't get me wrong, and I know, hey, Stephon and I talk. It's tough at Gallaudet because it's tough to win. I don't care where you're at, but when you win in this business, you stay energized. When you lose, it beats you up. It can saw you in half, and you know, you got to keep pressing through that. But you know, the reality is, and I read somewhere, I think it's a very accurate quote. The guys that really can enjoy sports are the ones that recognize winning and losing for the imposters that they are. And certainly I haven't been Nick Saban. In my time in Bridgewater, I've won them all. That didn't satisfy me. You know, there was one more that I needed. And I lost them all too, and that didn't kill me. So that would be my final message.
One last quick question I have for you, Coach Clark. Someone commented on Facebook that they were so appreciative of the good recommendation that you gave them that helped them get the job they have now. If you had to ballpark guess, how many students or past, you know, football players or coaching staff members do you think that you've given job recommendations for? I'm just curious. You know,
I don't know. I mean, I've done it on a regular basis. You know, I'm fortunate, you know, that I think, hey, I've placed people. I have a lot of people coaching right now. I'm excited about that. A lot of the local people here, head coaches, are guys that played for me and played for us. And, you know, I do think that. I think the key thing is that if you do this right, it's a springboard. Because the bottom line is, and, you know, we discuss this all the time, particularly at the Division III level, you know, you volume recruit. And, you know, all the kids that finish this, you know, you can take a picture of, here's my freshman class, and here's the kids that finished with me. You know, your retention is always a struggle, because there's only 11 people on the field in one football. You can't keep everybody happy all the time. But I can look a kid in the eye and say, you stick with us and finish. And that don't mean you have to be a frontline player, but you stick with us and finish, you'll be accomplished. And I think that's held true. You know, I can look at my senior classes over the last 25 years, and very few of those people aren't doing things very significantly in their lives.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sure a lot of people have sent thank you texts when they say, I got the job. Thank you for your good reference. And that also just goes to show the relationship you build with your players, that it's not just about winning or losing the ball game, but the people you impact along the way. So thank you.
Easier if you win or lose.
Yeah, it helps.
I choose winning, but when in doubt.
Thank you so much, Coach Clark, Colbert, and Healey for joining us tonight. This has been a great chance to talk about, past, present, future of BC football and just the journey along the way. So thank you all so much for joining us. This concludes our time for this evening. If you missed part of the presentation, we will be posting the recording on our Bridgewater College Office of Alumni Relations YouTube channel, and then also uploading it to Facebook. So you can watch it there if you'd like, comment, leave your thank yous for the coaches there. So thank you all for joining us, and go Eagles.